Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to our webinar. I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much for investing your time in being here with us this morning and investing your time in employer branding during what I'm sure we can all agree are very different and uncertain times and a new landscape for us. I am joined by my colleagues, John McCall, Herlihy and Julian Constance, each of them an expert in their own fields of employer branding, talent acquisition, and helping our customers with their employer branding. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand over to John and Marie to take us through some of their thoughts and some of their responses to the recent change in circumstances, and then I'll follow up with some questions for them.
Thank you very much, Janine. Good morning, everybody. Coming to you from Dublin here. Welcome to everybody who's joining the call. I lead talent attraction for LinkedIn in EMEA and LATAM, and I'm joined with my colleague Mary Herlihy here this morning to share with you a little bit of the context and some of the experience of how LinkedIn has approached what has been truly unprecedented times for everybody. And I think part of that is because as the economic environment globally has continued to evolve at such an unprecedented pace, businesses and TA teams alike have sort of found themselves trying to adapt to a new normal, which is in itself a bit of a moving target. And LinkedIn is no different in that regard, and how we have found ourselves trying to react. I mean, companies, nobody has really faced this before, and it's not as though anybody has a handbook ready to go on how companies should adapt. But to share our context, what we have seen is that there has been a twofold kind of requirement, one being an immediate need to react and take a more operational focus and to figure out how we do things differently, as well as then taking a more strategic and forward-thinking approach about how we will look to the medium and to the long term. So to prepare our teams and our candidates indeed for once things get back to normal, whatever that normal will look like eventually. So I think how we've approached that, and Mari will join in as well here, is that from an external focus, we've really tried to make sure that we are dealing with a candidate-first perspective and being very, very focused in that regard. And then from an internal perspective, it has been a very team-first focus. Mari, just your initial thoughts on that, if you would.
Absolutely. These have just been such unusual times for all of us, and I think that I'm probably showing my age here, John, but even for those of us that were recruiters when the last financial recession kicked off in 2008, none of us have ever seen change as sudden and dramatic as this before. So, internally, that focus has really been on putting the team first. Like in LinkedIn, we've got a team of over 450 people globally that work within our talent acquisition function. That's a lot of people full-time focused on hiring, and our leadership globally, Brendan Brown, and more locally here in EMEA, April Samowitz, have really led from the front in ensuring that there's an over communication, which I think is really important right now, of reassurance to everybody on our team. Firstly, that the support and resources are there to look after everybody and their well-being. But secondly, really clear and thoughtful communications resources to help set recruiters up for success in how we support our candidates during this really stressful time. So really, it's been a team-first approach, internally ensuring that we're supported personally, but also we're supported professionally to make sure we're showing up in the best possible way for our candidates.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, I suppose maybe to try and build on that a little bit, if we look at how we have focused externally, one of the immediate things that we had to do was sort of keep that firm focus on our candidates and our members, and to try and understand what is life like for many of the people who are working from home now. So much of talent attraction is based around how do we engage a candidate in a conversation? What do we do to make them feel as though they are relevant and important to us, and how do we understand what their world is like? Now, an awful lot of what we would have done traditionally and up until very recently would be featuring our employees in live settings in their working environment. And much of our talent attraction campaigns and indeed our calls to action around those were based on specific examples. And as the new normal, for want of a better expression, was starting to change into working from home environments, we had to be very cognizant of what those situations were like for our people who we were hoping to engage on the platform. And at a very straightforward operational level, that meant changing things like the graphics that we were using. So rather than featuring people gathered around workstations or in offices enjoying lunch breaks and stuff, indeed in offices that we know that are temporarily closed to our employees at the moment, we have to pivot and start to turn around to using photographs and settings and pieces of content where people were working in their home settings, you know, potentially with the dog in the background or some of their kids or a partner or something, because we understand that that's just how it is these days, and it's okay to see or to hear things going on in the background. But immediately tied to that as well was an understanding that an awful lot of what we do to engage our audience is based around events and bringing people along a journey with us and helping them understand a little bit of what LinkedIn is like by allowing them to experience that directly for themselves. The reality now is that we have to shift and do everything in that respect online in a virtual environment, at least for the foreseeable future. So how do we use our tech and keep it meaningful and personal and engaging while still keeping everybody safe and allowing us to reach our message out? So things like, you know, our various types of live recruitment seminars, indeed our interviewing, all shifted onto a virtual setting. And then, as we move along onto the next the next phase, we looked at scenarios how once we had embedded in the immediate and operational response that we needed to make sure that everything was okay with for straight away, then we look at, okay, slightly forward thinking, what do we need to do to try and strike up the conversations with talent for a future time, knowing that once things get back to a normal setting, we will still need to be able to have great conversations with candidates. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're keeping in touch with the candidates who we want to hire further down the road. The phrase that comes to mind is about making friends before you need friends. But one of the real things that has come out of this particular time from a business and indeed from a talent acquisition perspective is that even though people are working from home, time is probably a more precious commodity than ever before. Everybody's very busy with various different parts of their lives. So when we're trying to get somebody's attention, we've got to be really cognizant of what indeed we're trying to do. So when we're reaching out, we need to be giving something rather than just looking for something back. An example of how we've tried to do this is that we regularly feature learning courses now where we are offering free access to parts of our LinkedIn learning solutions where candidates and members can upskill in various different areas. One of the examples that's showing on screen is a recent one about a post about how to build resilience in working from home. And really all we're doing in some scenarios is reaching out to people and saying, we understand things are different now. Here's just some tips and here's some ways that we can maybe help you navigate this new scenario. The fundamental idea behind all of this is that the narrative has shifted, so the call to action has shifted as well. Whereas previously we would have been very much based around an immediate, you know, we would love you to click this button and follow through and apply for one of these roles and start up a conversation. Whereas the people may not really be in the headspace or may even indeed have structural international boundaries such as no travel to be able to consider moving roles. So, for example, one of the main things that we do out of the EMEA headquarters in Dublin is we relocate a lot of talent from across the European market to come and work in our Dublin office. Now, for many reasons, that's not possible at the moment, but also, even if it were possible, people mightn't feel comfortable moving. So what we're trying to do is build a longer-term strategic focus with that talent so that once people are back in the space where they can consider a move, that they're more warmed up, they're more predisposed to want to enter into that meaningful conversation and come into an interview process with us. And also, while that is happening, we are aware that there is an opportunity for our TA teams. and everybody's keen to do their bit to help combat the COVID-19 crisis. So what we've done is we've launched the Recruiting for Good program, which is a program where about 150 of our talent acquisition partners across the globe, given their unique position to act as trusted partners in the emergency, are able to offer supplementary support to government agencies and healthcare organisations in their efforts to ramp up talent acquisition to hire for those frontline roles. And so what we've done there is try to position ourselves with our content and with our program that we're here for the long term. We are trying to get to a stage where we have reacted in what we know to be the immediate operational response, but with a very strong forward-thinking strategic focus about 6, 7, 8 months down the line when things start to return to normal. So we're back there and we're relevant to our candidates and to our members at the same time. Mary, from your perspective, how has this moved along?
Yeah, so going back to what I was touching on earlier, internally the focus has really been people and team first. So as this was all kicking off, of course, there was lots of operational aspects that needed to be prioritized. Firstly, making sure that everybody was okay, that our team, were given, leave where they needed it, particularly for people with, caring and parental responsibilities, making sure that everyone had the equipment they needed to work from home, but also really important, making sure that we were providing our candidates, our internal stakeholders, and all of our stakeholders with the reassurance and guidance that they needed. To touch on what John was saying, though, as he mentioned, our EMEA headquarters are based here in Dublin, and we have a lot of staff who are selling into regions across EMEA, and hence, given the language requirements, we relocate many of the people that we hire. So as this situation has evolved, it's become clear that, that's not possible in many cases right now. So like many of you on this call, we have had to slow down our hiring. And, for us, we see that as quite an exciting opportunity in many ways, because we've been growing exponentially over the last number of years, and this quieter period is certainly an opportunity for LinkedIn's talent acquisition team to optimize our function and prioritize initiatives that we just didn't have enough bandwidth for previously due to the hiring needs. And I'm sure every other recruiter on this call can probably relate to that challenge. And so when we dealt with all of the immediate candidate comms and issues, it then got to the point of, okay, so we're now going through a quieter period than normal. How do we make the most of this opportunity? So we knew that we were going to be prioritizing some longer-term strategic TA projects, but whilst our leadership team were aligning on that, in the meantime, over the last couple of weeks, we have really been focusing on upskilling our recruiters to pivot to areas that we wouldn't normally be focused on. So, for example, I know that my core skill is recruiting, but I wouldn't necessarily have super strong or built out formal project management skills. So, as a team over the last number of weeks, we've really been leveraging LinkedIn Learning to upskill in a number of areas so that when we kicked off our increased focus on these projects, that we would have the skills to optimize. So we've really been focusing on, project management, data analysis, leveraging online collaboration tools like Excel, like SharePoint, and obviously thinking about how we can do all of that in the context of all of us working remotely. So that's been the focus for recruiters on the ground within LinkedIn over the last couple of weeks. In the meantime, our leadership have really been thinking about the medium term. So, which projects are we going to, and work streams are we going to prioritize? And one of the things I really wanted to emphasize here is that we don't have it all figured out yet. We're still on this journey. And, the leadership have been really considered on taking time to decide and align globally on the scoping and the prioritization of these projects, which I think is really important because, you know, it can be very easy to be like a busy fool and just dive into all of these projects. But for us, it was really important that we optimized globally and that we stayed aligned instead of just doing our own thing in our own region. So we've now got to the point where we are kicking off these projects, and we have decided to focus on a number of key areas. So as you'll see on the slide, internal mobility being really important. So continuing to scale our internal mobility function and making sure that we continue to provide great opportunities for our existing employees. In terms of the data-driven innovation, of course, we're already very heavy users of LinkedIn Talent Insights, but we really want to think further about how we can optimize the use of data to be more strategic. Thirdly, to John's point, we're really thinking about, pipelining for the future, and also thinking about, how our profile of hire might adjust when we come out the other side, and also thinking about how we can focus further on the diversity and inclusion piece. And then the final area is on the customer value. So, we're mindful that it's important for our function to share externally with our customers what we're doing, the challenges that we're going through, and kind of sharing some of our insights with the talent community because, of course, we're all in it together.
First of all, thanks for sharing that. It's really great to hear about the shift that you've been able to make and make so quickly. I've heard a lot about virtual interviewing and even virtual onboarding, but I can't help but wonder if there are any gaps that you've seen that still need to be filled. For example, once you've actually made an offer, someone accepts that offer, there's a period between when that happens and when the person actually starts. And given that there's so much going on and so much uncertainty, have you adapted how you sort of stay in touch with candidates that are, or rather people that are going to join in the future?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Janine. Thank you. So absolutely, and you're spot on. For anybody who had signed a contract or accepted a role, of course, their first thought during all of this would have been, oh my God, am I still going to be joining? So for us, it was really important that we added on additional communications on top of what we call our standard lock-in process. So we do already have a cadence of communication with people post the point of offer, but we did introduce a couple of additional steps. So firstly, recruiters engaged directly with all individuals straight away over the phone. And I think it's really important that it's, you have that direct communication over the phone and that personal touch, and to reassure them that we were very excited that they were joining and that we were doing everything possible to make sure that things would run smoothly. We also shared with them, being very proactive in sharing with them comms in terms of how LinkedIn is responding to all of this. So we shared with them lots of comms from the exec team, how we're supporting our clients, how we're supporting our members during this time. We also set up an additional call with people who are due to start with their hiring manager. And then I suppose the other thing that we found, because there's in EMEA, we are relocating a lot of individuals, I suppose we had quite a few cases which kind of needed a lot of individual focus and time, just depending on what was happening in the person's country. So there was a lot of work on some of those cases just to make sure that we could best support people, obviously the individuals who were still able to relocate, and then as the situation evolved, we had some individuals who started remotely, making sure they got their equipment, etc. But we held our first virtual induction early in April, and feedback from that was very positive, which we're really pleased about. But I suppose what I do want to emphasize, Janine, is that was in addition to our standard lock-in process. So we have a three-pronged approach for people once they accept a role at LinkedIn. And so after they sign a contract, 1 week after signing their contract, their skip level leader will reach out with a message to introduce themselves, welcome them to the team, and share some further video content about the team. Then we always have a call with the hiring manager, so the hiring manager can take them through induction, onboarding, certification, and then about a week or two before they're due to join, they have an onboarding buddy, and their onboarding buddy will reach out either over the phone or over email to welcome them and, you know, reassure them that they will be there to support them. So I suppose I would say to people on the line, of course, you know, there's definitely additional support that you need to give people during this time who are due to start, but if you don't already have a standard lock-in process, this is a good time to maybe look at that if you're going through quite a hiring period right now.
Thank you. That's great. And then, John, just building on something that you mentioned around the sort of need to build a relationship for the future with potential candidates. And you mentioned this specifically in regards to relocation, which at the moment are very, very difficult to make happen. However, there are some companies who are actively hiring right now. And even those companies will struggle with candidates who may not be actively looking to change jobs right now. How do you get the attention of the candidates that you want when they may not be interested in changing roles at the moment?
Yeah, I think part of the answer to this, a great question, I think part of the answer to it is to understand that grabbing attention is really just the very first step in what is, at the best of times, quite a long hiring funnel. And that funnel itself looks different now, given whether companies are actively hiring or not, that because the landscape has shifted itself so much, grabbing attention is now only part of the equation. And so that landscape is longer, it's different. And companies who are looking to have candidates to relocate, whether they are from abroad or whether they're in market, there will be structural barriers in some instances, but candidates may also feel a little bit uneasy about moving. And so I think it's important to understand what success might look like in that process at the moment. So things will take longer. Candidates will take longer to respond. Now, on the flip side of it, because fewer companies are using advertising at that or are advertising at the moment, now is probably an excellent opportunity to advertise to really reach your candidate audience. So we would expect to see higher click-through rates for any of those campaigns that are running. But what it might actually mean is that it's a case of starting a conversation now that will last months rather than weeks. And I think that's key too. So I think part of the understanding is that just to know that that funnel will now be longer. I think the ability to reach out and to grab attention has to be couched firmly in an understanding of what the new landscape looks like, and people are working from home, or people will have barriers to moving, or might not be in the headspace to move. So it has to start with that, but then understand that it's going to take longer to reach the ultimate hire.
Got it. So meeting people where they are, essentially. That's awesome. So John, Mary, please stay on the line, because I'm sure there will be a lot more questions that are going to come from our audience. But I'm going to move us on to Julian Constance, who is a consultant and knows absolutely everything about employer branding. And he's just going to tell us a little bit about some of the great examples that we've recently seen. So over to you, Julian.
Thank you, Janine. No pressure. Hello, everyone. I think it's accurate to suggest that for years to come, the strength of a company's employer brand will be measured by how it treated its people, its candidates, its clients or customers, and its suppliers during the current crisis. Having spoken to a number of employer brand professionals over the past few weeks, many colleagues, and plenty of people working in companies across industries, this is certainly the common view. And how you communicate with your employees, your candidates, your talent pools about the decisions that you're currently making, why you're making them, and how they'll impact your workforce and the broader community will be crucial. And some companies have recently gone quiet for a host of reasons. They may be facing challenges with regards to products and services, revenue, employees, or very likely all of them. The teams responsible for content creation and deployment might be overwhelmed by the influx of information and the surge of ambiguity. And a lot simply won't say anything for fear of saying the wrong thing or coming across as insensitive. But this really is not the time to go quiet for brands. For all the reasons shown on this slide, now is the time to take advantage of the fact that 40% of our members are reading the news more frequently. 30% are checking social media more often to keep up to date with what's going on currently. I think perhaps the sentiment, however, of 90% of people surveyed in Edelman's recently released special report entitled Brand Trust and the Coronavirus Pandemic, suggesting brands should do everything they can to protect the well-being and financial security of their employees and their suppliers, even if it means suffering big financial losses until the pandemic ends, probably says it all. Investing in your employer brand in this unprecedented environment is certainly something that will benefit your organization now and long into the future. It will allow you to strengthen the bonds with your employees and with the talent community. Whilst the current health crisis has underscored the need to continuously nurture your employer brand, it's shifted what you should be talking about and how you should be talking about it. And if, like many other companies, you put your content calendar on hold for the foreseeable future, which is understandable, then these trending hashtags and the change in those trends month on month might help inform what you should and can be saying. It suggests that members' interests are changing as we move through the different stages of lockdown, so whilst addressing their current concerns is important, it's important to consider what people will want to hear next month and the month after that. People are looking to organizations for guidance to navigate what comes next. But before I go any further, I want to point out that as was true before coronavirus, and will no doubt continue to be true once lockdown is a hopefully distant memory, there are a few employer brand tenets that will remain. Be authentic, be empathetic, and be human. How you say things is just as important as what you say. And different audiences will be in different places regarding how they're handling the current situation and what they hope to hear from you. These changing hashtag trends bear this out, so aim to be sensitive to all of them. 84% of the respondents to the Edelman report that I referenced earlier claim they want to hear from organizations at this time, and we've got a pretty good idea what they want to hear. So now we'll look at how this ties into your EVP, your employee value proposition, and your employer brand. And to make sure we can give you actionable, practical guidance, we've created 3 core principles for employer brand content creation based on what all of this data is telling us. If you follow these principles, it will help empower your content marketing and your talent teams to create meaningful, impactful content during these very challenging times. And we've got a few examples of great content from a range of companies, and you'll see at least one of these 3 core principles come through in all of these examples. And here are those 3 core principles. These should underpin your current content strategy, and you should consider how the content you're pushing out to your employees, your candidates, and your talent pools is helping achieve or highlight one or more of these principles. The first one is to manage employees through change. Most businesses make the claim that obviously people are their greatest asset, and now is the time to back up that claim. This is when you should show how your values as a company help create and maintain your company culture, enable your people to achieve great things, and build your company's sense of community. Secondly, lead with trust. Everyone is increasingly worried about fake news and looking to organizations as an alternative source of trustworthy information. Equally, a significant number of companies include trust, honesty, integrity as value pillars of their business, so make sure that those are at the heart of all of your content. Bring to life your company values in a way that's empathetic, impactful, and transparent. Third, adapt to drive business continuity. Tell people how you're reacting to a global environment in a state of flux and why you're reacting that way. And where you're being proactive and planning for the future, be bold and declare it. People are desperate for hope and positive messages. Anything that suggests what the new normal might look like is useful. Because in many ways, companies are going to be hugely important in shaping that new normal. So talk about how you're showing up and providing value to employees, to candidates, to clients or customers, and your suppliers. Outline what you're doing to create safety, stability, and reassurance. These 2 examples from LinkedIn and Starbucks bring to the fore elements of their company vision and culture pillars. LinkedIn's vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce, and here we're showing how we're trying to achieve that in the current climate. At LinkedIn, we talk often about being in it together, whether that relates to colleagues, candidates, or clients, and this is backing up that claim. It's empathetic, it's unglamorous, there's no video, there's no daring headline. It's a simple message which has clearly resonated with people. And the Starbucks post is very simple too. It shows that they've put their people at the heart of their response to the pandemic. Your EVP is all about your people. So it's important now to show you care about them. What adds to the impact of this message is that it comes from the top. The actual content is from Kevin Johnson, their CEO, and whilst it's targeted at Starbucks customers, it speaks about and to Starbucks people. Leaders taking the lead and being honest is incredibly powerful, and it makes it feel very personal. Here we have two quite different posts, one from Nando's, one from Farfetch. This Nando's video is very powerful because the message was written by one of its co-founders, and all of the imagery is of current Nando's staff from around the world. It's incredibly honest, referencing the proud history of Nando's, how challenging times like this will impact the business, but also how, because of its people, they will bounce back. It was a video intended only for internal distribution before Nando's restaurants around the world were forced to close, but because Nando's staff was so proud of the business for responding as they did, it was very quick and it clearly outlined their plans. They used it for external employer branding purposes too. And if you do get a chance to watch the video, I suggest you do. It's on the Nando's UK page. It's completely in line with Nando's values and their culture. And the second post is from an online retailer called Farfetch, showcasing the intention of the business to continue supporting boutique retailers during this time. It's all the more powerful because the message comes from the company's founder, which gives current employees confidence in their leadership team and hope that if they are making such an effort to support their supplier partners, they'll do the same for their people too. It also suggests bold leadership, thinking ahead, and a company true to its values, which is not something that all of their competitors can promise, can claim, or have shown at this time. In this first example from Gymshark, we hear from their founder and CEO. He talks about Gymshark's commitment to its people and its customers, as well as their plans for the short-term future. It's not overly stylized, and that mirrors the authenticity with which Gymshark tend to communicate with external and internal audiences, and again, it's something that you can watch on the Gymshark page. The final example is from Honest Burgers, who have been open enough to talk on various platforms about the network they've set up for furloughed staff to keep them connected. A lot of their content focuses on their people and the efforts they've made to keep those who've been furloughed connected and engaged. They're making every effort they can to help keep everyone physically healthy and emotionally positive. Honest Burgers did what they had to ensure business continuity, but they are showing here that they are positive about the future and their people. And very sensibly, their clear and genuine efforts to look after people is helping inform much of their employer brand collateral, what they're pushing out to candidates, and to their broader talent pools. In closing, I'd just like to reiterate that the fundamentals of creating compelling, engaging employer brand content remain true even during this time. Employer branding is not just for an external audience, it's important to note, it's also how you communicate with and engage your current employees. Using words and terms like employees, flexible working, help and support means your content is likely to resonate with your employees and potential future candidates alike. So be authentic, be honest, be human, and if you don't know what the new normal will be, don't be afraid to say that. But equally, talk about the efforts or initiatives that you're putting in place to plan for the future and mitigate the risks as you see them. Use hashtags that tie in with your content and where possible, get your leaders and your managers involved. Messages from the top are incredibly powerful. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Janine, who I know has some questions for me.
Thank you so much, Julian, and thanks for sharing those examples. And yeah, one of my first questions, I've heard concerns from people that it is harder to cut through the noise right now. There's a concern that there is already so much being posted and being advertised. So I was curious what your view is on this. What are you seeing? Do you see an uptick in specific employer branding messages? And if so, what's your advice to cut through the noise?
A very good question. I think there's certainly been an uptick in employer branding messaging, as is borne out in the data, because that's obviously what people expect and what they want to see. and businesses have certainly responded. In terms of cutting through the noise at a time like this, I would suggest it's not, frankly, hugely different to any other time. Firstly, decide who it is you're speaking to. Is it your employees? Is it candidates? Is it future talent? I would start by defining who your target audiences are. Secondly, work out what they want to hear, what messages will engage and resonate with them. I don't think every organization who's pushing out content necessarily does that. So there is a lot of noise, but it doesn't necessarily land. And then finally, I would decide what your call to action and your KPIs are. Are you simply looking to generate awareness? Are you trying to drive traffic to your LinkedIn page, your LinkedIn Live pages, for example, or are you trying to get some form of conversion? Decide what success looks like, and once you've done that, I think your first port of call is to speak to your current employees to understand what it is they want to hear. I would then look at trends on various social platforms, like the trending hashtags that we referenced earlier, and then I would more closely monitor, or very closely monitor, your industry and talent competitors to see what employer brand content they're pushing out, which is resonating, and then constantly finally review the performance of your employer branding activity so that you can make changes and tweaks as you need to in order to keep aligned with your KPIs and achieve those campaign goals.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then if you think about sort of the future, where there's some predictions that the impact of COVID-19 on the economy is going to be greater, much greater potentially than the recession of 2008. And so specifically, we believe that unemployment is going to increase. Do you think that employer branding is going to be equally important if there is a greater pool of talent? Do you see it changing? What are your views on the future, Julian?
Another good question. And I think in terms of the importance of employer branding now and in the future, regardless of the how big the job market is or how many potential candidates are looking for jobs, I think it will be crucial. And I think potentially even more so if you have a much bigger pool of potential candidates or there are more people looking for jobs, because employer brand, frankly, is about ensuring that you find the right person or people for your organization. So the bigger the crowd, the longer it's likely to take you to find that person, and the more likely it is to cost more. And if you end up having to settle for someone who isn't quite right because of time or budget constraints, so you've had to rush the process, what impact will that have on your attrition rate? That's not a positive thing either. So more people on the job market arguably makes the job of your talent acquisition and your recruitment teams even more tricky, which is why I think it's really important, even at times like this, to make sure that the people you know you might want to hire in the next 3, 6, 12 months know who you are as an employer, what you can offer them, and what they should expect of you. If you continue to build and nurture those talent pipelines now, it will help you more quickly and cost effectively identify the people who are right for your business and hire them when everything picks up, hopefully before your competitors do. And I think it also means that they are far more likely to be a great fit for your organization because they've known up front what to expect, which means you're more likely to hold on to them for longer, which of course reduces the cost and the time impact of hiring. So I think that top of funnel awareness activity that employer brand frankly does, in so many ways, it's just as important now as it was before, if not more so, to put you a step ahead when the hiring demand picks up again.
Got it. Thank you so much, Julian. So I will invite John and Mary into the conversation, and I'm going to take some of the questions that have been submitted by our audience today. Thank you so much for that, and keep the questions coming, please. The first question, I think, Mary, this might be one for you. It's from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. The question is as follows. You talk about a return to normal and help people move once it's possible again. Is there any consideration for a new normal that will remain in effect, where simply more people will wish to work from home now that it's been proven possible? And how will you deal with candidates that are potentially more interested and or demanding regarding working from home? What are your thoughts on that, Marie?
It's a great question, and one that's top of mind for all of us, absolutely. Personally, I think there will be a shift in expectations. I suppose, like everyone else, we're still at an early stage of the journey in kind of understanding fully what aspects of working from home work well, and what the more challenging parts are. So I suppose from a data perspective, we don't have the data points yet to best assess how exactly that's going to shift. And I think that comes back to, one of my points from earlier, and that really kind of looking at the data to better understand, what our future pipelines and profiles of hire are going to look like, because we are going to emerge back into a different world when we come out of this. And I think, for us, certainly there will be probably some work to do internally with other functions like people analytics, to understand what's worked well, and what's been more challenging, so we can kind of further refine our profile of hire. But I suppose so we're not quite there yet in terms of knowing how we're going to pivot specifically. I think there will be some changes for all organizations, and I think that's going to be unique based on, their business and their requirements. But I do think there is going to be a change for sure. But I suppose in the meantime, my only advice would be to try and work with other stakeholders internally to look at the data and also get feedback from your employees in terms of what's working and what isn't. And I think, as many people have called out on other webinars as well, we do need to realize that while people are working from home right now, they're working from home during a crisis versus working from home during a normal time. So it's important to distinguish between that as well when assessing what's going to work in the future.
Yeah,
I hope that answers the question.
I believe so, and none of us can exactly predict what the future will hold, but it's definitely something that we all need to start thinking about. So I think that's really, really useful. I have another question for you, actually. Could you share some ideas how to create a great virtual candidate experience, especially now that they cannot come to your offices for interviews, etc.? And this question is from Manuel. Thank you, Manuel.
Yeah, sure. Again, great question. So for us, we amended some of our candidate comms in terms of people. So we moved on to virtual interviewing only from March. So certainly, just in terms of the content that we're sharing with people beforehand, so more video content in particular, just around virtual office tours, so they can get a feel of the building, even though they're not able to come in. I suppose, to be honest, though, Janine, because we are hiring a lot of people from overseas already, we would have already been doing a lot of virtual interviewing. So it wasn't as big a pivot for us as it would be maybe for some organizations where they may not be so focused on the relocation piece. But yes, absolutely. In terms of our comms, we've included resources for our candidates in terms of how to best, tips and tricks and how to best show up in a virtual interview. So it's really just sharing more resources with them to make sure that they're set up for success. But equally as well, I think it's really important not to forget to give the hiring managers some additional education as well. Even though, again, we have an audience who would be used to recruiting virtually, but normally towards the later stages of the process, we would meet the person face to face. So I think it's just giving the hiring managers some extra support as well to again, share with them content on how to interview well virtually, and also to put the candidate at ease. So I think it's increased content and comms both on the candidate side, but also critically on the hiring manager side.
Great, thank you. I have a question from Faye, and I think it would be really good to hear, Julian, from you what your external perspective is on this, what you've been seeing, and then John, maybe you can give more of a LinkedIn perspective. So the question is, due to some businesses struggling during this time, part of us felt guilty pushing content about how well we are doing and what we have been able to do for our staff. We didn't want to seem insensitive to those struggling. What is your stance on this? So Julian, I'm going to go to you first to see what you've been seeing externally around this and what you've been hearing from customers.
Sure. And it's a perfectly sensible question. I think a lot of organisations who are doing well at a time like this have felt that. And I think firstly, be compassionate, be empathetic is obviously incredibly important. We've reiterated that point. But I think people feel reassured, and certainly that's the feedback that we've had, that not every organisation is in a pretty dire state, is having to furlough people, that there is no growth. People tend to generally be buoyed to know that there are organisations out there who are still doing well, potentially flourishing. It's the manner in which you deliver it, and I used the line earlier, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. So it can potentially be a galvanizing message, certainly for your current employees, but it also gives hope to people externally that it's not all doom and gloom. There is a glimmer of hope out there. So I think as long as it's delivered in a compassionate, empathetic way, most people will certainly consider that to be a good news story. And don't forget that there are a lot of people now who are obviously looking for work, and those people want to know that there are still opportunities out there for them.
Great. Thank you, Julian. John, what's your point of view?
Yeah, I think to build on that, in reference to not so much what you're saying, but how you're saying it, and I think the point around compassion is hugely important, but also authenticity. And one of the things that we have seen, very substantial results in terms of our candidate engagement and talent attraction strategies is by allowing people who do the jobs and who are in those roles for us to tell their story. So it's a much more first person oriented delivery rather than something that feels a little bit too corporate. And I think that can be a key to making sure that whoever's on the receiving end of it sees it as a positive thing, to the point about, it's good that not every company is struggling at this time. And I think if it's delivered with compassion by the person who is actually doing that role, that can be really, really helpful and very beneficial, both in terms of, conveying the overall employer brand, but also making sure that you're not sounding too scripted and too corporate line. I think that can certainly help put candidates at ease.
Right, thank you. So I have another question from Andrew, and I think this refers to some of the statistics that you shared, Julian, around the types of messages that are going into the market. And the question is, are there also any figures around the level of jobs being advertised in the market? It would be good to understand the voice out there. We have several economists at LinkedIn. Our economist in EMEA, his name is Mariano Mamertino, and I would recommend that you follow him on LinkedIn because he regularly shares his views on what he's seeing in the LinkedIn data, and obviously combined with some of the external data as well to understand the trends in terms of jobs. So definitely have a look at Mariano's profile. We can share this after the call as well. And then our chief economist is based out of the US. Her name is Karen Kimbrough, and she also regularly shares this type of data. And then there's possibly more that we can share with you, Andrew. But thank you for the question. That's great. So I think we are at time right now, and I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers today. John, Mary, Julian, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and for answering all of these questions. Thank you to our audience for investing your time and being here with us. That was really, really excellent. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.